This is a year that is going to determine a lot about what that long range is going to look like. And I think what people are trying to figure out is, how do we continue to trust the CQI as we move into the future? If in a year like 2025, the CQI is focusing on this, forget what the SCA is doing. They didn't bother showing up for a conversation, right? You're here for the conversation, which, as I said, deserves brownie points. But how do people, if given the opportunity to focus on all of these things that are so detrimental in a time when people are saying quality doesn't bear any importance necessarily right now? Because I assume that you guys don't just focus on specialty coffee, right?
Correct.
And you did mention in previous episodes that as you have seen firsthand, and is your lived experience, that quality is a way out of these, the best shot that a producer has to make a better living, correct?
Absolutely.
So in a year like 2025, is that evident?
No, it's challenged by the current market environment, 100%.
If you're looking for a free way to support the work we do, bringing you conversations with our amazing guests on the Daily Coffee Pro podcast by Map It Forward, please subscribe, follow, and rate us wherever you listen to the podcast. It really helps us out. It's also a huge help if you share this episode and our social media content with your coffee friends. For links, check the show notes. Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and this is the final episode of a really wonderful, brave, and really deep conversation, in my opinion, with Michael Sheridan from the CQI. Michael, before we have this conversation, thank you for this series. I suspect that this conversation is also going to be as intense as the 4 previous that came before it. But I'm really grateful that you did show up for this conversation. You've definitely given me a lot to think about. I don't think that you've changed my opinion about some things, and I think they're pretty obvious what they are. But you have definitely given me an insight into who you are as a person and as someone within this situation. So I'm really grateful that I had the opportunity to get that insight. So thank you again for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
My pleasure. So at the end of the last episode, I asked a question, and that leads into what this episode is going to be about. And this episode, as we talk about the changes at the CQI, this episode is going to be about the CQI's future state. I want to start that conversation in the current state. And I want to ask you the question that we finished off the last episode with again. With everything that's going on in 2025, I think the thing that people are most confused about in the business community, while Q graders and people who are Q trainers are very upset about these changes for various reasons, lack of control of their own destiny, their business models have been uprooted, all of the things, blah, 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 blah. In the business community, a lot of people are wondering, given the crisis, and to define the crisis, the price crisis, the climate crisis, the coffee yield crisis, the logistical crisis, the tariffs that are going on, the geopolitical issues that are really weighing heavily on coffee. There's just 6. We can stop there, right? The convergence of all of those things in a year like 2025, we didn't talk about labor, we didn't talk about currency, all of that, right? All of that is happening in 2025. What we in the business community are confused about is why this is the conversation that you guys thought was the thing to focus on in 2025 and leading up to it, and not the other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is not what we plan to come into 2025 talking about. We talked a lot last episode about our post-harvest processing program. That was one of, I would say, probably 3 primary focuses that we had coming into the year. updating our post-harvest processing program, expanding our own financing of development projects through our Global Coffee Fund, and engaging the industry and the trade in a different way to create more paths for direct engagement with our mission activities in the places where coffee is grown. So it was not on our radar in the same way that it is today, and it was not part of our lead agenda. Um, and I think it was the reflection of the fact that a process that that we did talk about a little bit in the last episode, a multi-year process that SCA has been tracking to bring to market a new product to support quality evaluation happened to coincide with all that other gnarly stuff. You stopped at 6, but you could have gone on, right?
Yeah,
And
100%.
and I think you know there's no question about the centrality of quality evaluation to the support of the trade. It does add another item to the list, right? It's another transition to navigate, or another item to navigate. So in that sense, it's probably not the best timing, but it's not something that we intended to bring to the fore. On the contrary, the idea was, how do we reconnect with mission, drive more revenue to mission, or drive more resource to mission, both our own and revenue from industry.
But it has hijacked the conversation. In a year like this, I would assume that the CQI would be focusing, for example, let me give some context. In a year like this, with prices doing what they're doing, farmers are strip picking and sending it all to the commercial market. Fuck your quality.
Totally.
Why
There's
wouldn't
defaults and
that?
yeah, I mean,
Right.
yeah.
Right? Like, all of that to me would have been a bigger, more important conversation for the CQI to be having. And focusing on that would probably have gotten CQI the attention that would have positioned it I don't think that there's a competition between you and the SCA. And I know that you guys felt very threatened by that. But what I'm thinking about, and we're talking about the long range future of the CQI, right? This is a year that is going to determine a lot about what that long range is going to look like. And I think what people are trying to figure out is, how do we continue to trust the CQI as we move into the future? If in a year like 2025, the CQI is focusing on this, forget what the SCA is doing. They didn't bother showing up for a conversation, right? You're here for the conversation, which, as I said, deserves brownie points. But how do people, if given the opportunity to focus on all of these things that are so detrimental in a time when people are saying quality doesn't bear any importance necessarily right now? Because I assume that you guys don't just focus on specialty coffee, right?
Correct.
And you did mention in previous episodes that as you have seen firsthand, and is your lived experience, that quality is a way out of these, the best shot that a producer has to make a better living, correct?
Absolutely.
So in a year like 2025, is that evident?
No, it's challenged by the current market environment, 100%. And I think it came up at some point during our conversation. In my work at CRS many years ago, I spent 12 years working on coffee programming, and for 7 of those years, I kept a blog called the CRS Coffee Lands blog, which developed some readership in the industry and was designed to speak precisely to the kinds of issues that you're raising, based on the privilege I had to engage with producers in that work every day for a better part of a decade in Central and South America. I took the first year in the CQI role to get settled, and promised our our marketing and communications director that I would start blogging in 2025 again. And when I did, it was precisely these issues that I was focused on. It was saying, hey, we have built our focus is on quality because of this understanding of what quality can mean for people's lived realities, and their livelihoods. Quality is under threat by these markets, precisely for the reasons you're talking about. And so looking at both drawing on my experience in the field, working with producers who faced who were working market rallies and the implications for quality, and then as a buyer for intelligentsia and, not $4 markets, but after years of, $1, $1.20 markets, a $2.50 market, there was a little bit of the same dynamic. And, high prices as enemy of quality is a kind of a theme. And so these are issues that we started out the year engaging on, and are conversations that I think are really important to us in all of industry, and we want to stay engaged in them. And a lot of the things that we're talking about for the transition is understanding how can we position ourselves to create value for producers at a time when they're facing all of these things. Understanding that the transition on the QE side and the Q is another wrinkle that the industry will deal with. These other things don't go away. We have two programs, quality evaluation and post-harvest processing, but our work and our impact over the years has been much broader than that. When we have had projects that may have focused on those two kind of work streams or deliverables, we would sort of get in and immediately understand the opportunities for value addition, both upstream toward the farm and downstream toward the market. And so the Coffee Corps volunteers who have been mobilized over the years in support of our work have supported, sample prep training, sample roasting training, competitions, auctions, public tastings, and then upstream to the farm, support in quality-focused post-harvest, quality-focused farming practices. All of that, I believe, is still in scope for the organization, and we're putting together kind of a comprehensive process to try to understand where the opportunities are. Completely understanding that's happening in the context of, you just did something that eroded trust, and so trying to say, we believe we still have a lot of value to create. We have contributions to make. We have our post-harvest processing program that's still working every day in the places where coffee is grown. And we want to understand where there are other opportunities and to do it in a way that is inclusive and engaging. So we're the working kind of concept title we have is just study tour, but it's designed to do different things. But mostly it's a multi-stakeholder consultation process where we'll talk to CQI educators, CQI in-country partners, producers, farmer organizations, coffee institutes, research institutes, traders, roasters, everyone throughout the supply stream, to ask basic questions about where pain points for quality are, where opportunities for quality are, and where CQI can add value and support that process, while also having this conversation about what the long-term value of a quality-centered strategy is. In a $4 market is different than it is in a $2 or $1 market, but the through line is that quality continues to be the best way for smallholders, especially to hedge risk and seize opportunities. So when we were in Indonesia earlier this month for World of Coffee, we managed to convene with the help of some of our local instructors conversations with a couple dozen producers. We have traveled to Brazil, Colombia, El Salvador, Guatemala, planned for the remainder of this year, and we'll be looking to convene those kinds of conversations. We'll have sort of interviews and surveys to try to collect this information and to begin to understand what the opportunity is for us to add value. Now, the Coffee Corps approach has allowed us to be flexible and respond in a kind of an opportunistic way to create value. And the idea of these inputs is to say, okay, we would like to continue to do that, but also there may be a way that we can invest in building something programmatic that has a longer term consistent approach. In the first episode, we talked about the origins of CQI, and it was born out of a conversation more than 30 years ago in a committee meeting at SCA. The long-term planning committee had this realization that quality is evaluated at origin primarily on the basis of green, physical, and in places where coffee is purchased on the basis of sensory. That idea led to the Q. It took 8 years between the establishment of CQI and the creation of the Q. So it took a minute, but that one idea turned into something that for 20 years shaped the way coffee is traded, and had an impact on coffee. The hope is through this process to identify another idea that will allow us to build programming responses that 20 years from now we can say this thing helped to change the industry by creating value throughout the supply stream in the way that the Q did, which is kind of the magic of the Q. It worked for the trade, but it also, when it was delivered to producers, really helped producers participate as equals in that trading system. I think for me, in the first episode, I mentioned among the many things that I'm feeling, exhilaration was one of them. You kind of raised an eyebrow because of all the difficult and hard feelings there are. And these are the things that are kind of exhilarating, to understand precisely that problematic landscape and to say, we as CQI, as an organization, but also as a community, there's still opportunity for us there to be not just relevant, but to drive real change that has impact on people's lives. And the question was about trust, and that's it. And we need to. I understand that some people, we've been canceled by some people, and I respect that. But we've also been in conversation, and I've been personally in conversation with instructors and members of the community, and said, like, I'm going to show up every day and serve the mission, and I hope we have a chance to win back your trust. And these kinds of processes of engaging with people who are affected by all the dynamics that you talked about, we hope we can retain or earn back trust of people with whom we lost it, because I think together I know there's so much work to do, and I believe together we can make a dent in it. And that's all we can do is to show up and continue to do that.
In a year like 2025, as we see all these things that are happening, you guys are talking about how you have changed the way that coffee is traded. How has the way that coffee is traded changed and been a meaningful change in 2025? Because from what I've witnessed and with the things that I've been seeing happening on the C market, the way that I've been talking with people in major producing countries, we've seen a lot of defaults happen. We've seen people but abandon picking their trees because of a lack of labor. We have seen an extraordinary amount of impact happen because of all the other things than quality that have happened actually impact the market. Whose domain is that for? Is it? And I'm genuinely confused by this. I really thought this is the domain of the SCA to attract that. I have zero faith left in the SCA. Who, if it's not the CQI, so help me understand, whose domain do you think, as a coffee professional, whose domain is it to address those things? If it's not the trade organization, non-profit trade organization, if you guys are looking at development work for producers and that you believe that quality is the way for producers to earn a better living, and that's why the focus is on quality, and it's not quality that's actually causing the problems at the moment, where do we go from here?
That's a great question, and you're asking an ecosystem question, right? This is the ecosystem view. Whose domain is that? Whose role is that? And when I interviewed for this role, I said, that I see CQI as the closest thing the industry has to a development organization. I used to work for a development organization in CRS. CRS, TechnoServe, and ACD Avoca have done amazing work in the coffee sector over the last quarter century. And they have a lot of ability, but they are not coffee organizations. They're not of the industry, even though they engage credibly in the trade. There are a number of other kinds of organizations that are coffee specific: Food for Farmers, Grounds for Health, Equal Origins, that do work on specific issues: food security, women's empowerment, cervical cancer, in coffee communities exclusively. But they're delivering services not in a way that's different from us. We are touching the physical product of the quality and supporting the actual core function of the trade, which I think positions us uniquely in the industry, and really makes us the closest thing the industry has to a development organization. I would like to be in a position as CQI to move into that space, especially with $40 billion of disinvestment from USAID, the termination of USDA programs. I mentioned earlier that our ongoing work in Burundi was recently suspended, and the future of USDA funding is now also in jeopardy. In that context, I believe CQI has an important role to play in helping to address those issues. The last thing I'll say on this is when I was doing development work, working a lot with the International Center for Tropical Agriculture in Southern Colombia, I understood this framework that this G by E by M framework, genotype by environment by management, kind of the interaction of those variables that affect productivity, quality, and all kinds of farm level production outcomes, and trying to match the right genetics for the right landscapes and the right management practices for the right genetics, and getting that kind of complex equation right. I use that a lot in my work at Intelligentsia and in other places, engaging people who may not understand those things as in a different way, just as a taxonomy of all the things that affect quality. You have genetic variables, you have environmental variables, and you have management variables. And I think WCR is very clearly the industry organization for genetics. They're an industry-backed, industry-driven, quality-focused breeding organization. Corporate funded. They're from the trade. I think CQI can be the industry-supported management organization for coffee quality. Again, coffee quality didn't create the crisis, but coffee quality is the thing that is going to keep people through the ups and downs of the market, because we're not going to be at 4 or 390 or 360 forever. Quality is the best long-term play, and the industry has a continued interest in quality. They're investing in CQI to create the genetic materials. I feel like this is the biggest story that isn't reported in coffee, that WCR in 2030 is going to release 100 new varieties. It's going to change the future of coffee.
Who owns those varieties?
I believe they're public goods. I don't know. You have to have WCR on to talk about that. But the industry's making those investments. Just to get it on record, everybody should check before they look who's funding it and look at the agreements of who owns that seed stock. And I will mention that, if you don't know the Monsanto story, go and take a look at the Monsanto story. Anyway, that's all I'll say on that. Go ahead. Okay. What I was going to say is that industry is invested in quality in that way, and they've supported that work. We know industry is invested in quality. Right now, with the closure of USAID, the cancellation of so many USDA projects that were working in coffee, the most meaningful farmer engagement that's happening right now is happening in the trade. It's those Nespresso AAA sustainable quality, West Rock Rice, RGC3E, like the different platforms for farmer engagement and training. That's where rubber is meeting road. That's where connectivity is happening. So we know industry's invested in quality. There isn't
Are they interested sorry, just to clarify, are they invested in quality or are they invested in yield?
They're invested in farmer engagement. So there's a big focus on yield. There's a big focus on management and securing long-term supply. But I think there is a role there for quality and for CQI. And again, this process that we're getting underway is trying to understand what the opportunity structure is for us. But I think there is a need, and I think there is an important role that CQI can play. And I think we need to flesh out the role we can play. So long answer short, I'd like for CQI to be in a position to be addressing some of those issues. And as we were starting to do earlier this year, trying to start some conversations about what does quality mean in a $4 market.
Okay. As we wrap up this series, what is the final thing that you would like people to know as this chapter continues for CQI trying to navigate this?
I think we've covered a lot of ground. We've said a lot. I would say that CQI is moving away from the queue. And last year, in 2024, we celebrated the 20th anniversary of the queue, not knowing that CQI would not be involved in the queue for too much longer. It was an amazing opportunity to hear from people who had engaged in different ways from different places in the supply stream with the queue over the years, producers, traders, everyone from farms to the market and everyone in between. And really, it gave a great sense of the scope of the impact that the queue has had on trade. And I think for me, honoring that legacy is important. I know there's a lot of hurt out there right now, but I think if we can take a step back and look at what we've done together, it's pretty remarkable. And I told you offline that I spent almost 15 years working in international development, and that's not something you can do if you don't have a deep reserve of hope. And I am always hopeful. I keep running up against the kinds of challenges you're talking about: climate change, price, market volatility, logistics crises. You keep running up against those, and you keep waking up every day, and lacing up your boots and going back to work. And for me, that's the opportunity we have. The work isn't done, even though it's going to change a little bit for us. I'm so grateful for all the work that has been done over so many years in support of CQI's mission. And as many conversations as we have that are difficult, we have as many conversations that are supportive of CQI, recognizing what we've contributed in the past and the work that's still yet to be done, and CQI's role in doing that. So, I guess I would close out by saying we have a lot of challenges as an industry. CQI, I believe, is an important part of the solution, and asking people for the openness to continue to collaborate with us to be part of that solution. I think we have a lot to offer.
Will you, given that the SCA is the largest contributor to you guys, will you find ways to have other, because you ended up in this position, I have gathered from our conversation that the American government was the number one contributor. Now you've replaced it with the SCA. Are you guys going to take a different direction to make sure that you're not beholden to any one major contributor in the future?
Yeah, that's always the ideal, just to diversify your funding streams always in everything, right? Whether you're a nonprofit or a business or a personal saving and investing money. I alluded to it a little bit in passing, but we spent a lot of time in 2024 sort of looking at our business model and sort of seeing where our revenue is coming from. And primarily it's been coming from the private courses with the Q. And projects were always kind of like in recent years have been another important source of funding. And then industry funding has been, the people in industry who fund us have been very generous, but as a percentage of our total, it's been a really small contribution to our overall revenues. And we started working through 2024, thinking about, we understand that we're creating value for the trade, that we've helped to facilitate the trade, we helped to produce, improve quality, and help better quality coffee get to market. And that is something that has benefited the market. So how do we think about partnering in a different way with industry, creating paths for deeper partnerships, financial, yes, but also on the trade side. I think for me we started talking about the CQI mission of improving quality of coffee in the lives of people who produce it. There is a mechanism in there, a causal mechanism between quality improvement and livelihood improvement, and it's the market. It's turning quality improvements into better commercial outcomes. It may not be high prices for nano lots, but it may be secure business. It may be improve volumes because of more consistency. It may be year-over-year contracting, multi-year commitments that are based on mutual commitment to quality.
Which is probably what should have been the center of the conversation at SCA Houston. at Expo in Houston rather than this. Right? Like that was what everyone went to Houston expecting, is that the conversation would be around trade. So if I'm understanding you correctly, that is something that you think needs to be focused on, because the main revenue generator for the CQI is now with the SCA.
Right.
Correct?
That's right. SCA right now is our biggest donor for our project work. And I think, for CQI, that is how we understand the quality improvement to be translated into better livelihoods, is through the market mechanism and pairing producers who are committed to quality with buyers who are willing and able to compensate them for that commitment to quality, and in that facilitating, stabilizing, supporting the trade relationship based on quality. I think, you were asking about whose role is that. I see that as our role, and something that we've done for most of our 30-year history, and where we still have a lot of value to add. And I don't see other people who are permanent parts of the coffee sector in that space.
Well, I certainly don't see the SCA in that space, which is what all of us who would assume the trade organization of our industry would be occupying that space. So I am happy about what I'm hearing, that you guys intend to occupy some of that space so that you could actually put that on the map and make it a part of the conversation rather than these things that are being discussed, because this is how we got here, by not focusing on these conversations that I think are just really hard to have. Like, people would rather focus on competitions and latte art than have to learn about how to do trade in coffee.
I mean, I think I've alluded to my time blogging, and I was really grateful for the kind of readership and engagement that the blog generated. But I did have this nagging feeling, like I always felt like there should be a 0 or 2 behind the readership numbers, because,
Exactly.
I was working at the beginning of the supply stream, and seeing some people living very close to the edge, committing to quality, making sacrifices, working hard, and always kind of one climate shock or one market shock away from ruin. And when you're engaged with that, I'm not engaged with that on a daily basis now, but having been engaged with it on a daily basis, like it's hard to think about like anything else having the same level of urgency, right? As shoring up that, because it's a game of dominoes, and when that first domino doesn't get pushed, there's no game. And so, that was the conversation we were trying from our little place at CRS to sort of engage people in, and there was great engagement, but it was always like, I always felt like, oh, it should be deeper, it should be broader, there should be more of an industry conversation about these things, because our ability to do the competitions and to be at the shows is all based on it, and so I think that's where that's where CQI's heart is, and that was from the time I started interviewing for the role, it was conveyed so clearly through the board and the staff, like, this is our commitment, is trying to leverage our educational programs to create opportunities for the people who grow our coffee. And the way we're doing that is changing, but our commitment to that is stronger than ever because of the things that you're talking about.
Well, I hope it happens, because on a daily basis now I'm hearing of a different coffee producer that commits suicide, and of roasters and cafe owners who are committing suicide because they're so far in financial ruin because of what's happened that they can't stomach the idea of having to face the people that they love,
So awful.
because they feel that they've let them down. And for me, it is a daily occurrence. And it's what drives me to have these difficult conversations. And I will not let you guys off the hook. you can bet your bottom dollar that I will keep dragging you here in front of the public to have these hard conversations, because I'm not running away from the conversations where people call me up and say, my neighbor just committed suicide. And until I stop getting those phone calls, I will continue holding you guys accountable. And I hope that you are happy about that, because that's what we need to change this industry. Anyway, having said that, I do think that this was a really brave thing of you to do. I know I've said that a lot in this series, but I want to keep reiterating that. Thank you, Michael. I hope this is the first of many conversations that we have on the podcast. Tell people where they can connect with the CQI and with you.
Yeah, we'll be making more announcements about opportunities for connection at our on this study tour as we make our way around the world, different members of the CQI staff, and we'll provide details, to people on ways they can support this this community engagement exercise and our PHP program review. So, thank you again for the conversation. It's been great. Welcome.
My pleasure.
I welcome the chance to be held accountable and to come back and talk to you when we're further in through this transition.
I look forward to watching how you guys traverse what's ahead. We have a tradition on the podcast. On the final episode, the hilarious thing is Yanis is the person that started this tradition. But we have a tradition that the guest signs off on the last episode. Would you do me the honor of signing off our last episode for us?
Peace, love, and peanut butter. Thank you, Lee.
Have an amazing rest of your day, everyone. Bye. This episode is part of a 5-part series produced by Mapper Forward. Check the full playlist and guest details in the show notes, as well as how you can support our work in the coffee industry. Become a premium YouTube subscriber, explore our Patreon and any brands we've partnered with to bring you this podcast. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It really does help us grow our audience.